So last week, DNC Chair Tom Perez and Bernie Sanders went on a unity tour across the country. They made speeches together in different cities across the country talking about some general Democratic policies and in an attempt to unite the Democratic Party. So in these tours in the speeches that Tom Perez has made, he seems to have made a lot more general statements saying that Republicans are bad, and in multiple cases saying that we came to whatever the state was because as Democrats we stand up to bullies, and he a lot of times would mention the state governor as a bully. For example, he came to Louisville, Kentucky, and Matt Bevin is the governor here in Kentucky, and so Tom Perez would be like, we came to Kentucky because we wanted to stand up to Matt Bevin, who's a bully because he wants to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And meanwhile, in Bernie Sanders speeches, he would talk about his just signature talking points that you would hear from him from the campaign from last year, just talking about income inequality, single payer healthcare, corruption, and just other policies that you would have heard from his campaign. The Democratic Party's been pretty divided ever since the primary in 2016. The party split between the establishment wing of the Hillary Clinton side and the more left wing and progressive side of the Bernie Sanders wing. So this past February, Tom Perez, the way he got his DNC chair position was in a close race. He beat Keith Ellison to become the chair. So early on in November, just like right after the 2016 election, Keith Ellison was endorsed by a bunch of people. He was endorsed by Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and even the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, Chuck Schumer. He was the favorite to win, and he was one of the only real candidates running at the time. But as time went on, President Obama decided that he didn't want Keith Ellison to win the DNC chair position, so he endorsed Tom Perez, and when Tom Perez entered the race, and Obama just wanted someone in charge of the Democrats that was more on his side, and he gave Perez a major push and eventually led to his narrow win in this election. And since then, the DNC has been trying to portray Tom Perez as a good leader that is for the people and is someone that everyone can get behind. But in this case, with the unity tour that they just did, the Democrats are really just using Bernie Sanders as a mascot to try to get people to unite around the party. They don't really actually want to adopt Bernie's ideas and policy. They just want him to represent the Democratic Party and get his supporters on their side. But the problem is a lot of voters can see right through this, what the DNC is doing, like with Tom Perez in this case. And so this is a clip from the first stop on this unity tour and the reaction to Tom Perez.
Regardless of why you showed up today, you showed up for a reason. Something compelled you to find the space and time to be here, and I want you to ask yourself what that reason is. Right? Maybe it's because you love a certain senator from Vermont. So maybe you came, though, because you're curious about the new DNC chairman and the future of the Democratic policy.
So out of all the stops on the tour, this was probably the worst reaction to Tom Perez out of all of them. They didn't even have to mention his name. They were just like, "Here, are you here for the new DNC chair, Tom Perez?" And everyone just immediately booed him. And so almost all of these stops on the tour had at least a mixed reaction to Tom Perez, but in all of them, Bernie Sanders was cheered way more than Perez. And so here's the problem with Tom Perez, which is why people don't like him, and which is why people are booing him when on the stops on these tours. So first of all, he backed Hillary Clinton in the primary very early on. She was the corrupt establishment candidate. She took millions of dollars from Wall Street in bribes. He was definitely the better candidate. He would have beat Trump easily, and right now Hillary's at about 35% approval rating, and Bernie right now is the most popular politician in the country at 61% approval. Another thing that Tom Perez should be criticized about is he supports the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and this is a complicated trade deal, but that has a few good parts, but most of the parts in this trade deal would be bad. The worst part about it would just be that it encourages businesses to ship their jobs overseas so that they could make a bigger profit off of lower wages. And I think Tom Perez mostly just backed TPP because Obama supported it as president, and Hillary also supported it for a while. I think it was like 40 something times before in the primary she changed her position, and Perez could have easily changed his position just like Hillary did, but he never actually did. So next, as Secretary of Labor under Obama's presidency, Tom Perez could have gone after a lot of bankers and prosecuted them when they were involved in a lot of illegal activities going on, just screwing over people, but he didn't ever go after these bankers, and people see him as a corrupt person on the side of the big banks because of this. Also, during the race for the DNC chair, Perez was questioned by a reporter about some of the horrible actions that Israel has taken against Palestine, and here's his reaction.
Hi. Zed Jelani. I saw your question about the BDS movement. It's really interesting. That's a debate a lot of Democrats are having.
Oh, is that right?
A lot of people across the country are having. It's interesting. People are quick to condemn the BDS movement, but there's also been sort of really strong actions against human rights by Israel. For example, 1,600 Palestinians lost their homes last year to home demolitions.
I understand
do you condemn the home demolitions just like you would condemn BDS?
It's that type of stuff.
Secretary, would you condemn the home demolitions by Benjamin Netanyahu? Secretary, do you also condemn the expansion of settlements? Secretary Perez, do you feel like you can represent Arab Americans who are involved in the DNC?
So Perez has been on the side of Israel for a long time, but when questioned about Israel and what they've done by this reporter in this case, he wouldn't even defend his position and simply just walks away from the reporter and doesn't even give him an answer. Next, on the topic of healthcare, Bernie's been consistently in favor of a Medicare for all single-payer system, while Perez hasn't been on board with it. He has given about the same general statements that Hillary gave during the election, saying that healthcare is a right and that we need to expand on the Affordable Care Act. But he, along with the other establishment Democrats, haven't really offered a specific healthcare plan, and they certainly haven't. And most of them certainly haven't endorsed Bernie's single-payer health care plan. So this is why a lot of people dislike Tom Perez, and which is why they don't want to unify around an establishment leader like him. And overall, I don't think this unity tour that they did really accomplished a whole lot in terms of unifying the Democratic Party. I don't really think Bernie should be going across the country rallying with Tom Perez, which is a person that doesn't agree with him on many of the policies, and he's a part of the establishment Democrats that tried to rig the primary against him a year ago. And so I don't really know why Bernie would want to go on a tour with Perez after that. And the Democrats are really just using Bernie as a mascot to try to get people to support their establishment candidates. I don't think the people are going to unify and come together to support the same old corrupt leaders in the Democratic Party that we've had for a long time. I don't want to support these corrupt leaders who aren't going to support the policies that the people want, but I think the voters will unify and rally around a true progressive, someone like Bernie Sanders, who is for the people and consistent with his message.